The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When the days were completed for their purification according to the law of Moses, Mary and Joseph took Jesus up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, just as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every male that opens the womb shall be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer the sacrifice of a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, in accordance with the dictate in the law of the Lord. Now there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, awaiting the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Christ of the Lord. He came in spirit into the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform the custom of the law in regard to him, he took him into his arms and blessed God, saying, "Now, Master, you may let your servant go in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you prepared in sight of all the peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and glory for your people Israel." The child's father and mother were amazed at what was said about him, and Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, "Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be contradicted, and you yourself a sword will pierce, so that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed." There was also a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years, having lived 7 years with her husband after her marriage, and then as a widow until she was 84. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day with fasting and prayer. And coming forward at that very time, she gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were awaiting the redemption of Jerusalem. When they had fulfilled all the prescriptions of the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. The child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Tradition. Such an interesting, multifaceted, deep word. We love this word of tradition, especially here at the University of Dallas. We throw it around like references to Homer, Aquinas, or Aristotle. And it is certainly serendipitous that this weekend is one of the most interesting traditions here at UD, Groundhog Weekend. To students, faculty, staff, and alumni of UD, Groundhog is one of the most fervently, passionately, deeply perhaps ingrained tradition of UD. And if you are not or looking on from the outside, it is certainly a very odd tradition. Tradition, when we use it as Catholics or in a Catholic context, tradition is often used to evoke or to indicate solemnity. Perhaps talking about the extraordinary form of the Mass, or celebrating Mass ad orientem, or Latin, or chant, or incense, or things of that nature. There's an aspect, though, of today's feast, the Feast of the Presentation, that can help us deepen our perspective and appreciation for this word, tradition. For centuries, the Church has prayed the prayer of Simeon, in Latin, the Nunc Dimittis, the prayer that we just heard in today's Gospel. "Lord, now let your servant go in peace according to your word." The Church has prayed this prayer for many years at Compline, which is the last hour of the Liturgy of the Hours. It is an hour in the office that is meant to be prayed right before retiring. So when monks and priests and religious pray it, the next activity is meant to be going to bed. It's almost as though the Church, in her wisdom, wants to take this special aspect of the presentation and drive it home over and over, wanting to help us see and understand something about this feast. And I would say it's no accident that this canticle of Simeon is prayed right before we go to bed. There are many times in our lives, multiple, if you will, little deaths in which we are called to let go, like Simeon, to depart in peace. This happens probably for us most repeatedly, at least hopefully for college students, before we go to sleep, right? Before or when we sleep, it is a sort of dying in a minor sort of way. We lose capacity of our body. We lose our ability to think and to reason. It's why if we think we committed a sin when we dream, it's not really a sin because we weren't really free to do what we did. But there's also other occasions in which we can say there are minor sorts of dying. Perhaps in handing on to someone else, to handing on to a successor, our own responsibilities, handing on to another our projects, our duties, our power, or our authority. Ephraim the Syrian, a patristic commentator, in reflecting on this passage from the Gospel, he sees in the person of Simeon a successor to the great Moses. Moses, who received from God on Mount Sinai the responsibilities of being both a priest and a prophet, and who handed these on and were handed on successively through the Old Covenant, ultimately culminating in the person of Simeon. Now, Ephraim sees a beautiful sort of irony here. Simeon passes back to the Lord what he and his predecessors first received. In receiving the Christ child in his arms, Simeon returns to Jesus, to the Lord, those offices of being a priest and a prophet. He gives them back to the one who gave them first to him. We are called to remember that we will all be like Simeon. We will all be, if you will, in his shoes, because, like him, one day our time will end. One of the saddest scenes in the British serial Doctor Who is every time the Doctor has to regenerate. And one of the saddest times is when David Tennant, who plays one of these incarnations of the Doctor, has to regenerate. Now, if you're not familiar with the sort of ethos of Doctor Who, one of the things that keeps the show going, passing from one actor to another, is this alien's, this Time Lord's ability to regenerate. When he is mortally wounded or when he is about to die of old age, his body is able to grow into a new body. So in one sense, he retains the memories and the experience and somewhat of the personality of all of his previous incarnations or regenerations, but there's also something new in the new Doctor. Well, David Tennant's Doctor does not want to depart. And at the end of his last episode, he says a big, long goodbye to all of his companions. And his very last words before regenerating are, "I don't want to go." Fair enough. Who of us is eager to go? Now, I guess depending on the responsibility, we might be eager and chomping at the bit to depart. But I'd say it's natural enough for us to want to hold on, to keep that power, to keep that authority, to see, well, I want my project to continue the way I want it to go. The danger of not letting go, though, is to exhibit a lack of trust in God. But in addition to that, it also deprives the young of continuing, of perpetuating, of furthering that project that was begun. It's okay if things are not done as we would like or done in the way that we would want them to be done. Simeon shows us, he teaches us to be vigilant, to look for Christ when it is our time to go. Because Christ is present in that traditio. He is present in that handing on. And we see this in many ways. Parents, you see this day in and day out. Raising children is one long succession after another of traditios, if you will. Teaching them, above all, to want sainthood, to want sanctity, to be virtuous, to be good, and all of those lessons that go into supporting that conviction. And a big part of that is also trusting that when your children are adults, when it is time to let go, or when it's time to pass from this life to the next, that they are not alone, that Christ will always be with them. You dears, students and fellow alumni, UD is never as good as it once was when we were here. But students, when it's time to go, go. This place, or you can come back like myself. Some of us really can't leave. But as the students here, it's not meant to be in perpetuity. When it's time to depart, depart. And trust that UD tradition will continue. Not every single tradition. Things will change, things will end, and new things will begin. But Christ is present both in that continuity, in that consistency, and he is present in that newness. And Catholics, lay people, often this happens more often than you might be aware of. Whenever you have a new rector or a new chaplain or a new bishop, Christ is also present in that continuity, and he is present in that newness. Now, I will say before anyone starts to, this is a gossip or rumor, I am not going anywhere. This isn't a sort of farewell song, no. As far as I know, I'm staying here, and Bishop Burns is also staying here as the Bishop of Dallas. But before these transitions happen, it's important for us to reflect and to remember that yes, things are not the same. Things never are the same, and that's okay. There will be differences depending on who is responsible, who has power, who has authority, who is tasked with accomplishing this fulfillment of this duty or not. We're not, though, just Simeon. We're also like the Christ child. Sometimes, in one instance, we are the one doing the handing on, and at other times, we are the ones doing the receiving, that being handed on to us. It's indicative, if we are the ones who are receiving, to pay attention how God returns to his temple. The Almighty, the creator of all that is, the one who the people were afraid of on Mount Sinai, returns to his temple not with power and with majesty and splendor and might. God returns to his temple by being a vulnerable, weak, little child in the arms of his not strong, not rich, not socially influential, but his poor but devoted parents. This is a challenge to us when we are the ones who are succeeding our patres or our elders, is to trust on the one hand that yes, the Holy Spirit is working within and through us in our dreams, our hopes, our goals, our desires, and at the same time to turn to and to listen to those who have come before us, to listen and hear the voices of our patres, or if you will, our Simeons. We might say to ourselves, why did mom and dad do that? I'm never doing that. Or we might say, why did they stop doing that really awesome UD tradition? Or, Father, I'm never going to celebrate Mass the way you do. I'm doing it my way. We all must listen, be curious, and learn from those who went before us. And then, yes, it is up to us to decide, but we must always respect and honor our elders, even if we don't always agree with them. Because it's a wise lesson to remember that we are not and we will not always be the ones who are receiving. All of us will be like Simeon in every aspect of our lives. Because one Doctor Who reference is not enough. If one instance of the Doctor didn't want to go, there's a beautiful parallel between a later regeneration of the Doctor, one played by another British actor, Peter Capaldi. He is also facing the end of his life, and he, at the beginning of his last episode, also refuses to change. He is tired. He says, I will not change. But in the course of his last episode, he sees all of the good, but specifically the lives that he can save because he has that ability to change. And at the very end of his episode, he gives a beautiful farewell, sort of giving advice to the next instantiation of the Doctor. Remember that hate is always foolish and love is always wise. And his last words are, Doctor, I let you go. Today's Feast of the Presentation shows us that instead of tension and instead of conflict between the old and the young, We are called, if you will, to the Pax Traditionis, the peaceful handing on to another what we have received, in the presence of and always guided by Christ. As we prepare to come forward to receive the body and the blood of the Son of God, may we, like Simeon, let go and hand on what we have received when our time comes, and like the Christ